Okay, as I said, and as should be obvious, I'm Dr. Schurman. My office is in Peck Hall 352, which is right down the hallway in the first office block. Take a right, take a left, take a right. It's got a little thing on the door. My email address is ted.sherman@mtsu.edu. Notice I don't have a phone number down. It's because if I'm in my office, I don't answer the phone 9 times out of 10, literally. It's spam. We don't have spam filters for our phone systems, and usually somebody's trying to sell me something. So I don't answer the phone. If there's messages, I usually don't check them. Email is the best way to reach me. And notice I have on the syllabus, do all of you have one of these, by the way? Because I do not have any extras. It's on D2L. It's been revised once or twice. And I emailed it out, revised one, I think it was Saturday. So if you added later than Saturday, you need to get on the D2L webpage, click the content tab, click the syllabus tab, and you'll find it there. As I say under the email, you can reach me generally between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., except obviously then when I'm in class, which on Tuesdays and Thursdays is from 8 until about 1 o'clock. I've got 3 classes back to back and then a night class. And I usually reply within 2 or 3 hours. Definitely within 24, unless I'm out of town or something. Office hours are going to be 5 to 6 p.m. Tuesday evenings, again, because I've got a 6 o'clock class. And then shortly before class, 7:30 to roughly around 8. And then after my last class of the day on Tuesday, Thursday, from 12:45 to 1:45, and by appointment. If none of those times are good for you, I can meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I can't generally meet later than that on Tuesdays because I'll be getting ready for my evening class. Okay. Notice, since it doesn't say it online, I don't believe, the title for this course is The Renunciation of Power in the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Okay. We're going to be reading all of the Lord of the Rings, 3 novels. It's not a trilogy, by the way. 3 novels or 1 big, thick novel, okay, and the 7 Harry Potter novels, okay. You cannot pass this course thinking, oh, I'll just watch the movies. It won't happen, okay? For the simple reason that for both sets of books, the directors / screenwriters take an awful lot of liberties with what occurs in the actual books. For example, if your only experience of the Harry Potter novels was the films, you would walk away, if you'd seen films 1 through 8, you would walk away thinking, oh, these are all about revenge. Harry wants to get revenge against the guy who killed his parents. It's not true. The reason you would think that is because, specifically, in the last 2 films, the directors cut something from the beginning of the first part of Book 7, and they cut something from the end of Book 7. And those 2 things that they cut are really important for the overall arc of the story. They completely change the meaning of the story. Okay? The films are ultimately about, or the books, I should say, are ultimately about forgiveness and redemption. But that's not what comes across in the films. And I won't even talk about the Lord of the Rings films. It'll be pretty clear by now. I detest both sets of films. Okay. There are good things about them, especially the Lord of the Rings. Cinematically, it's beautiful. I mean, it's shot in New Zealand. You can't do anything ugly in New Zealand, according to my son who was there last couple of years ago. So you need to get the books. Lord of the Rings, I would prefer you to have this copy, but if you don't, that's fine. The only reason I'd prefer you to have this copy is because you can, I don't know if you can see all the bent over pages there. I'm going to be referring to page numbers in this. I'm not going to refer to Book 6, Chapter 4, paragraph, because I can't do that. So if you're not using this one, you've got to be able to follow along in whatever you're using. Which brings up another thing. you need to bring the book to class every day, okay? Well, let me rephrase that. If you want to learn anything. If you don't want to learn anything, that's fine. If you don't want to learn anything, don't come. But if you do want to learn something, you need to bring the book so that you can highlight, underline, annotate, make comments, etc. Same with the Harry Potter novels. If you're using Kindle version electronically, which I talk about a little bit later on, that's fine. Okay. When I teach my Harry Potter course in London, which I'm doing next summer, by the way, I've gone to using all electronic text simply because to bring a stack of books about that tall takes an awful lot of space in luggage and takes a lot of weight when you are packing for a month, and weight becomes a premium issue. Okay? So the Harry Potter text and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Okay? I've got a supplementary text on here because every other time I've taught this course in the past, and this is the first semester I've changed it, I've required students to read this essay by Tolkien titled On Fairy Stories, and I've usually spent the first couple of class periods talking about it because it's really important. It's especially important for understanding Tolkien. Okay? And if you've never read it, I would strongly encourage you to read it. There's a link on the syllabus. Okay? It's about 50, 60 pages long. Some of it's pretty dense. But if you really want to understand Tolkien and what he's doing in, for example, The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or The Silmarillion, that's kind of the key. It's kind of the key to unlock what Tolkien is doing. Okay? I really think he wrote it more for himself than he did for the people that he delivered it to. It's kind of a, what in Christian terms would be called an apology, a defense of fairy stories or fantasy. You'll hear people say today, you might talk to some of your friends, adults, other adults, etc., and they'll say, what classes are you taking? Oh, I'm taking a course in Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And they're going to go, what? I mean, they give you college credit for that these days? Tolkien helps explain why. Okay, these kinds of stories are important or significant. And I may, depending on how much time we have, I may just kind of give a real, very, very brief introduction to that today because actually we are supposed to start fellowship. Let's see how much time we have. Okay, course description. I'm just going to read straight from the syllabus. The specific theme of the course is the renunciation of power in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Rowling's Harry Potter novels. I kind of stole the title from C.S. Lewis, who in a review that he wrote of the Lord of the Rings titled The Dethronement of Power. Okay? The Dethronement of Power. And it was a review he wrote in 1955, I think it was, something like that. I've just kind of changed that title a little bit. The course examines the ways in which each author, Tolkien and Rowling, focuses on the uses and abuses of power, okay? Which is a pretty current topic in our society, if you think about it. How each author suggests humility, restraint, and sacrifice, none of which are very current topics in our society. I mean, those are not looked at as things to be necessarily practiced in our society. Okay? But how each author suggests humility, restraint, and sacrifice, or the renunciation of power, as the means to resist and defeat arrogance, ambition, and the, quote, will to power. I have the phrase will to power in quotation marks because that comes from Friedrich Nietzsche, 19th century German philosopher. I used to also have some additional required supplemental reading in here, and there were a couple of readings from Nietzsche, because Nietzsche's ideology, which is the ideology of the Nazis, by the way, Hitler was strongly, heavily influenced by Nietzsche's ideology. Okay? That ideology is at play in both The Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter novels. Okay? And we'll see it especially at the end of the first Harry Potter novel. One of the main characters says, "There is no such thing as good and evil. There is only power in those too weak to seek it." Okay? That could be straight out of Nietzsche's mouth. He wrote a book called Beyond Good and Evil, all right? In which he asserts power is everything. The reason he hated Christianity is it was an ideology for weaklings. Christianity is for weak people, because what do? They pray for mercy and they forgive people. How weak can you be? Why not grab what you want and kill people who get in front of you? If they get in your way, stab them in the back, climb the corporate ladder that you make on the backs of the people in front of you, so to speak. Okay, the disclaimer. Syllabus is subject to revision. Why? Because we'll probably get behind. Now, it's not as likely that we'll get behind this semester as it would be in previous semesters, again, because I usually spend 2 days talking about that essay by Tolkien. And one of the reasons I took him out is to try to give me more time to actually get through everything that's in here. Because by the time we get to the latter half of the Harry Potter novels, we're probably going to be pushing it a little bit. Because one of those novels, it's not quite, is almost as thick as this whole thing. Okay, Order of the Phoenix. In the American edition, it's like 860 pages. About 200 of which could easily be cut. We'll talk about that when we get to it. So, if I make any changes to the syllabus, we're not going to drop anything. It's just, adjusting dates. That'll be done in class, and I'll try to remind myself to put something on D2L. Okay. The more important thing about that paragraph in the disclaimer is the comment to check your MTSU email and D2L daily before class. If I need to cancel class for any reason, I'll post it. Okay. I think in here I say I'll post it by 6:30 a.m. So if you have an hour drive, hopefully you'll know before you leave, assuming MTSU's email and D2L is working properly. Okay. Students with disabilities, you know who you are. You should have already gone through they keep changing the name of the office, Disabled Student Services or Office of Disabled Students or whatever it is now. And they should send me something electronically, I believe. If not, just make sure I get the appropriate paperwork by the next day of class. Okay. Classroom decorum. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this, and actually after I finish going through the syllabus, I'm going to launch into a little rant, but hopefully you'll understand why. Okay? Attendance is expected, but as you'll find on here, there's no quote-unquote attendance policy. In other words, if you come, you come. If you don't come, you don't come. I'm not going to mark it against you. If you're not here for a quiz, you're going to get a 0. If you're not here for several quizzes, you're going to get a bunch of 0s. That's not going to help your grade at all, okay? You're paying for it, not me. No skin off my back. But if you are going to come, and I know first day of class, you're dealing with issues of finding the right room in this confusing building, as well as finding parking, which there is not enough of, notwithstanding what parking services says. You might be here a little late. But try to be at class on time. Arriving after class has begun is rude, disrespectful, all that kind of stuff. If you know you've got to miss class for whatever reason, let me know ahead of time. Okay? You got a ticket, and you have a court date. Court dates in Rutherford County usually Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you got a ticket, you're probably going to miss. Now, it may not be this fall. It might be in the spring. But you might miss class for that. Similar, you got a doctor's, just let me know, okay? Because if you let me know ahead of time, I might let you take that quiz, okay? Might not, but I might. So notice, no makeup quizzes or exams will be given. Late papers will not be accepted. Your paper, the one that you're doing, this is a change in the syllabus from what I've been doing for the last 25 years. Papers due at the beginning of class on the day assigned. Notice, late papers will receive an F. Okay, the day that it's assigned is November 30th. So if you bring it in on December 5th, I'll say thank you. I'll write F on it and give it back to you. I won't read it. Okay? So bring it in on the 30th. If you know you've got to be out of town on the 30th, give it to me early. Okay?
Do you want a paper copy?
Yes, I want a paper copy. I'm old-fashioned. I don't like reading stuff online or marking stuff up online. And I will mark it up. Okay? When you get your paper back, there will be no question as to why you received whatever grade it was that you received. Thing I really hate about some of my colleagues, not necessarily in the English department, but around the university, is students will turn in a paper and they'll get their paper back, virginal. It's not been touched, it looks like. And it'll have a grade on it. The grade might be A or it might be C, and they have no idea why they got A, C. When I was in graduate school working on my master's, I had one professor twice in both classes. I turned in what I thought was a pretty decent paper, and I got the paper back for each of those classes with a B on it with nothing else. I mean, the paper, like this paper, notice, it looks like it's been turned. That paper looked like it had not been touched. I'm pretty much convinced if I had had a cop do fingerprints on it, only mine would have appeared. Okay? Might have been a smudge where the B was, but that was pretty much it. I kind of vowed at that point, never would happen with my students. Okay? Next paragraph. For this course to be successful and for each of us to get the most out of it, this course will be governed by common standards of decency and courtesy. What does that mean, will be governed? That's by me. I will determine what those common standards of decency and courtesy are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them in a moment. Okay? But they include these ideas. One should be quiet while another is speaking. One should be courteous to others. One should eat or chew gum quietly in class. That doesn't mean you have to eat or chew gum, okay? But if you're going to, do so quietly. It's really, one, disrespectful to the person next to you, and what's the word I'm looking for? Diverts my attention. When I see somebody eating something and the person next to them, the veins are starting to pop out because they're, about to blow a gasket. Okay? What else? One should not cheat or plagiarize from another's work. I know it goes without saying. One should pay attention to me and to others when others are talking. And, kind of going back to the plagiarism thing, you should do your own work. Write your own papers. Okay? Failure to complete any assignment other than daily quizzes. There's only two, folks. The final exam and the paper. I'll talk about changes I've made to the syllabus for this class. Will result in failure for the course. So if you don't turn in the paper, that's not just an F on the paper, F in the course. Okay? Similarly, if you don't show up for the exam, if you don't follow these standards, I'll ask you to leave. If it keeps happening, I'll call MTSU police, have them stationed outside. They'll stop you from coming in. Okay? Cell phones, laptops, tablets, all that kind of stuff. This is new to my syllabi. Use of cell phones for calls, texting, yes, selfies. I had a student last semester, I'm not kidding. Classroom like this, she sat back in the corner, and for like the first 3 weeks, she spent the entire hour and a half, like this. And 2 or 3 times I'd say, Jordan, put it away. And she'd put it away, but the next day, she's sitting there taking selfies. So don't. Notice all that stuff is strictly prohibited. If you're a first responder, if you're EMT or ambulance driver, if you're fire police, one, let me know. Right? You can have your phone out and on silent if you have an ongoing family situation or emergency that requires you to keep your phone available. Keep it on silent, and again, talk to me. Okay? If you have any kind of family emergency that might affect your role/performance in the class, let me know. I will bend over backwards to enable you to complete the course successfully. That is, If you can't be here, you've got a parent, loved one in the hospital, you need to be there, I'll probably say, fine, we'll arrange a way for you to take quizzes. If I had a student last semester, or maybe it was last fall, who literally ended up not being able to be in class at all. That student still successfully passed the class. I'll make arrangements. But you've got to talk to me immediately when this situation arises. It will not work if you come to me the last week of class and say, oh, I've missed the last 8 weeks because. I'll say, sorry to hear that. You should have told me earlier. And you'll fail. Okay? Notice it's not you may fail. You'll fail if you miss the last 8 weeks of class. Okay? Or 6 weeks, or 3 weeks, or 2 weeks even. Okay? Strongly discourage the use of laptops and tablets for note taking. This is new. Why? And if you want them, I can email them to you. There have been a number of studies done over about the last 4 or 5 years that have shown pretty conclusively students who take notes on laptops do not retain the material that they do if they take notes by hand. And here's why. When you take notes via laptop, anybody have a guess as to what you're actually doing? You're transcribing. That is, you're listening and you're just typing on along. Okay? Whereas when you're taking notes by hand, you're listening and you're filtering. So rather than trying to get everything, okay, you're paying attention to the most important stuff. And let me just throw this out because it kind of ties in. I record every class and I put it on YouTube. So if you're not here, it'll be on YouTube. Okay? I do that for a couple of reasons. I do it for students who miss classes for a variety of reasons. And I've also started doing it. I wasn't going to do it this semester for this class because I teach 2 sections of this class. And I've already got, 6 or 7 or 8 sections of this class on my YouTube channel. And I don't generally, have all these epiphanies every time I teach and come up with new stuff. Sometimes I do, okay? But one of the new reasons I've decided I am going to do this for this course this semester is self-protection. Over the last year or so, around the university and around universities in America, some students have come up and said, well, but I didn't know that that was on the exam, or I didn't know that that was covered. Now you know. Because everything that's said will be on YouTube. I don't edit the videos. So when I go on a rant against the administration, I don't cut it out. Okay? Everything is up there. If they want to fire me, they can fire me. Please. Ready to be retired. Okay, so as I was saying, there have been a bunch of studies that have shown taking notes by hand works better. What else? More than likely, not soon, I had shoulder surgery 7 weeks ago, and that's about as far as I can raise it. Partial replacement. But usually, come probably mid-October on, these whiteboards will be full. Okay? If you don't want to copy everything down, I would encourage you to pull out your phone and just take pictures of the whiteboard. That's perfectly fine. You are, however, allowed to use your laptop, tablet, phone, etc. for reading electronic versions of the text. But if somehow I see, you're Facebooking, you're doing something else, you're searching Amazon, you're buying off Craigslist, you're advertising, I'm going to ask you to stop, okay? I had another instance last spring where a student who sat kind of back over on this side of the class, she came in for like the first 6 periods, and both guys on either side of her said something to me. All she's doing is Facebook in your class. She ended up dropping the course because she wasn't one paying attention, but then she stopped attending. Grading, the grading's really easy. Semester course grade is based upon total number of points you earn divided by the total number of points possible. I don't know how many total number of points possible there will be. Depends on how many quizzes I give. Okay? It's pretty safe to assume there will be at least one quiz over each book. There might be more than one. Okay? So that'd be at least 100 points, because there's 10 books, plus the final exam, which will be 100 points, plus the paper, which will be 100 points. So there's going to be at least 300, but it might be more like 350. We'll see. Okay? 10-point grading scale. Schedule below shows the days by which you must have the novels read. Expect a reading quiz almost every class period. In that case, for example, for the 31st and next Tuesday, notice I got Fellowship of the Ring down. I would, if you've never read them before, I would try to read the first half of Fellowship of the Ring by Thursday. Yeah, I know, that's a lot. Okay? But we've got a lot to do this semester. This course is reading intensive. If you're not into reading intensive, I suggest you drop it and take something else. There are other 2020 courses that are not nearly as reading intensive. Okay? I think there are some that are more watching intensive. If reading isn't your bag, I would take one of those. Don't ask me what they are, because I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure there are. So the reading schedule, etc. Notice we pretty much got 2 days assigned for each of the 3 parts of Lord of the Rings. Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, the Return of the King. So that means you will have read pretty much all of this in 6 days, or 4 6-class periods. We will finish, supposedly, on September 21st. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how much reading needs to be done and kind of how quickly. How many of you, just curious, how many of you have read The Lord of the Rings before? Oh, that's good. Last spring when I did that, I think there was one. I was like, oh my God. But they'd all seen the films. Oh, I just love the films. Viggo Mortensen, is he? How many of you have read the Harry Potter novels? Okay, that's more par for the course. Usually, most folks your age kind of, were weaned on Harry Potter. You grew up beginning around age 8 or 9 or so, started reading them. So that'll help. And let me throw this out there. How many of you have a longish commute? Anybody? Longish 45 minutes to an hour? Okay. I've had students tell me about this. I can't vouch for it. I'll just pass on what they've said. I've had students say that they've taken the YouTube videos, for the class lecture, converted it to MP3, and then listened to it on the car on the way to. It sounds really boring to me. I'm put me to sleep, but they do that to help kind of keep them going. Similarly, they've gotten audio versions of the books and listen to those on the way to and from work. That can knock out a lot of reading right there. Yes?
Are you opposed to us listening to the audio version?
No, not at all. Especially if it's a good one. There are some recordings of The Lord of the Rings. Let me rephrase this. The Jim Dale versions of the Harry Potter novels are pretty good. Stephen Fry's is pretty good as well. The Lord of the... Man, it's been so long since I've listened to that.
It's like Rob Inglis.
Yeah. That's pretty good. There's also, in case you're interested, a wonderful BBC radio adaptation of The Lord of the Rings. 26-part series. It's 13 hours long. Okay? That, it skips a little bit, but not a lot. It really gives you the full flavor and atmosphere of The Lord of the Rings. It doesn't give you everything, okay? But it's pretty good. So 2 days Fellowship, 2 days Two Towers, 2 days Return of the King. Then we'll start right into the Philosopher's Stone / Sorcerer's Stone. Now let me briefly tell you guys how you guys on my evening class are kind of guinea pigs. because I'm doing something totally different that I've never done before. Usually, when I've taught this course, I've required the term paper, okay, and a separate paper on the Lord of the Rings, and then the final exam would just be on the Harry Potter novels. Okay? Decided not to do that because I was getting so angry reading 3 sets of papers. But because of reading papers where people weren't following directions. 95% of success in life, do what you're told. It's pure and simple. There's a red light. Stop. There's a stop sign. Stop. Don't just blow right through it. As I had somebody do the other day, some chick in a Beamer. I'm pulling up. I've got the right of way. She just barrels right on through. She's in a Beamer. I'm in a 2003 Tahoe. If I didn't stop, I wouldn't have been hurt. She'd have been crunched. Okay? But I did stop. So I've changed the syllabus quite a bit so that you only have one exam. That exam will be over everything, however. I don't know yet whether, I know I've got the exam posted as the final exam date for the class, but it might not be an in-class exam. It might be take-home, where you're going to write an essay of some sort, okay? I've not typically in this class done quizzes. We will do quizzes. I want to say that's what most of your grade, but it will probably comprise the largest portion of your grade. More than likely, you'll have more than 100 points of quizzes, whereas your paper is only 100 points, and your final exam is only 100 points. So the quizzes might actually end up being up to possibly half the grade. Okay? Which is another reason to keep current with the reading and such. So we'll jump right into the first Harry Potter novel. Notice I've only got 1 day assigned for it and 1 day assigned for the Chamber of Secrets. Why? Because the first book's really fluff. Until you get to about the last quarter. I mean, what she's doing there is she's kind of creating and setting the world. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll probably get a little bit behind after that day because we'll talk about how she came up with the idea and all that kind of stuff. But by the time I think we get to the Goblet of Fire, we'll probably be pretty much back on track. Okay? Then we have fall break. We come back and we finish all the novels. Okay? 21st, which is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, you've got to give me, either by that date or before then, the topic you're going to write your paper on. You can do that after class, orally. You can do it via email. Okay? You can actually type something up if you want and hand it to me. I don't care how you do it. But I want an approval by that day. That is, I want to give you approval by that day. Why? Because I'm tired of students emailing me the night before. So, Dr. Schurman, I forgot. I'm going to do my paper on. And they're saying, I am going to do the night before. Personal experience here, okay, as one who took 7 years for a bachelor's, because I dropped out for a year and got married and dropped out for a semester and worked, etc. Don't wait until the night before to write your paper or the morning of to write your paper. Might be a good idea to get a little jump start on it before then. And then the paper is due on the 30th. Okay? You've got some important dates there on your syllabus electronically linked. You can click on that if you're interested, like if you want to know when can I drop this course and still get all my money back, or what's the absolute latest date I can drop this course, all that stuff's there. Okay? Term paper. Notice it's not very long. You'll write one 2,100 to 3,000 word term paper. That is roughly 7 to 10 full pages. Okay? You get about 300 words Times New Roman 12-point type on a page. Okay? on a topic of your choosing. I give some possible topics down below about Tolkien and Rowling. But again, you got to get my approval by the 21st. This is to be a formal academic scholarly research paper. Okay? Notice, you may not cite internet sources in your paper. What do I mean by internet sources? That is not Project Muse, JSTOR, Gale Reference Library. That is Billy Bob's Harry Potter page. Okay? Because the vast majority of internet sites devoted to Tolkien and Harry Potter are garbage. If you get out there and do your searching, you'll find out about the Russians who have created a religion of Middle Earth. And Star Wars, by the way, I mean Jedi, actual people who think they are actual Jedis. Okay? So just be careful of that. That's why I say don't use it. But things that are published in scholarly journals online, which usually have an edu, okay, domain, that is fine. If you ever have any doubts, ask me. Ask me if such and such is a viable or reputable source, and I will let you know. Okay? Notice, you must have direct quotations. Not paraphrases or summaries, but direct quotations from at least 5 different Harry Potter novels. There are a total of 7. I don't care which 5. You could choose 1 through 5. You could choose 3 through 7. You could choose 1, 3, 5, 7, 4. It doesn't matter. But 1 quotation each from 5 different Harry Potter novels. Okay? And 5 quotations from The Lord of the Rings. I don't care if they're all from The Fellowship of the Ring, or they're all from The Return of the King, or they're spaced out. Okay? But 5 and 5, right? So you're going to have minimum total of 10 quotations in this paper. And you will have minimum on your works cited page 6 sources. The 5 Harry Potter novels and Lord of the Rings. Okay? Let me give you an example of how I grade. And this is what, for the last 15 years has been driving me crazy. Because, that's pretty clear, right? What I just said. Okay? Used to be when I would require the Lord of the Rings paper, I would say you've got to have, I think it was 5 quotations from the Lord of the Rings. And I get papers with 3, or 1, or 0, or 10. 10's fine, right? But 3, 1, and 0 are all not 5, right? So the way I grade papers, and I've done this for a long time, is I make it easy on me. And so the first thing I do, if you go down to read the bottom of the next paragraph, it says, failure to include a title for your paper, failure to turn in your paper at the assigned time, and or failure to follow any of these directions will result in an automatic F. So the first thing I do is I get all your papers, and usually because I'm anal this way, I alphabetize them by author's last name. And I just look at the first page. Is there a title? If there's not, I give you one, I set it aside. The one I give you is F. I set it aside, I don't read it. Why? You didn't follow directions. Makes my life easy when 20 out of 25 students don't put a title on their paper. Because then I don't have to read them. Okay? And remember, all this is on YouTube. So don't go to the department chair, don't go to President McPhee and say, you did it. Because I'll just point them to YouTube. Okay? So I do that. Over the last couple of years, it's gotten pretty good. Most students have put a title on their paper. I've only had like maybe 1 or 2 a semester. And I'll say the day the paper is due, make sure your paper has a title. And if it doesn't, write one in. Even if it's just, this is my paper's title. I'll put, this is ambiguous. This tells me nothing about what the paper is about. Okay? Poor title. What should a title do? Yeah, it's like a roadmap. It gives you directions. Okay? What if Tolkien had titled The Lord of the Rings instead Sam's Breakfast? You'd think, what the hell, man? I don't. Okay. So I do that first. Then I go to the works cited page. So I look at the first page and then I look at the last page. If the last page doesn't have the minimum number of sources, F, set it aside. Okay? If you made that cut, which again, vast majority of students do, then I go through and I look for the actual quotation. That doesn't mean you have to highlight them or put them in a different font or put them in a cutesy color. Okay? I just go through and I count them, and you'll see off to the side. 1, 2, 3. And for each Harry Potter novel, it'll be 1. And then there'll be another one, 1, next to it, etc. Okay? If it's got the 10, fine. Then I read your paper. If it doesn't, F. Okay? And over the last couple of semesters, I've had probably, I don't know, maybe 2 people a class for each of those papers. So not just in one, but in 2 papers. Haven't had the required number of quotations. Okay, so it's set aside and gets an F and such. And so there's another comment, the paragraph there about formatting. What should be on the left side. And because I'm such a nice person, I show you how your identification stuff on the left side of your paper should appear. Okay, I've got a comment or a paragraph about what kind of papers will receive what kind of grades. Okay. Comment about paraphrases, even though I've told you for the strict purposes of the paper, I want direct quotations. If you paraphrase additional material, that's fine. Just make sure you introduce the paraphrase and cite it properly. Okay? And then I give possible paper topics. And there's about 10, I think. Like the Renunciation of Power in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. What the whole entire class is about. I mean, that ought to be a pretty easy one to write. Okay? The War on Terror. I know it's a phrase we don't hear very much anymore, but it still applies. And The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Terrorism in Harry Potter and The Lord of the Rings. You don't think there's terrorism in the Harry Potter novels or Lord of the Rings? Just look at Voldemort and his minions, and the kind of jollies they get from doing things to people. Okay? The virtues of mercy and pity in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Christianity in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Notice I've got Christianity in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, but what about atheists? Why am I not being inclusive? Why not atheism in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter? Because there isn't any. Okay? There isn't atheism. Well, I'll take that back. Voldemort. Okay, Voldemort's pretty much he's really actually not though. Voldemort's name means fly or flee from death. He's afraid to die. He's not afraid to die because he thinks necessarily that's all there is. He's afraid to die because he doesn't know what lies beyond the door. In other words, there is something there. Okay? Sacrifice in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, humility in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. You get what the second half of the title pretty much ought to have. I don't care which order you put them in, but it needs to be in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, something like that. Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter is fairy stories, self-denial in Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, kind of like sacrifice. Good and evil, if you want to get really basic, yet also, at the same time, really profound. Death in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. But if you try to come up with Jesus in The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, you ain't going to find him. Jesus ain't in Lord of the Rings. Nor is he in Harry Potter. Gandalf is not Jesus. Albus Dumbledore is not Jesus. Okay? Harry is not Jesus. All right? So then this is what your first page should look like. Okay. 50, so I've got 35 minutes, something like that. Obviously, I've told you what this class is about, renunciation of power in these novels and such. So what does that mean in terms of what we're going to be talking about? Okay, we're obviously going to be talking about these novels, but that's not all. Okay? Because the novels aren't only about themselves. That is, Harry Potter isn't just about an 11-year-old kid named Harry Potter who discovers on his 11th birthday that his parents were murdered by the greatest dark wizard who ever lived and that this dark wizard is after him. Yes, that is the plot. Okay? But the novels are about much more than that. Give me an example, because almost all of you said you have read these before. Give me an example of something else that these novels are about, or something else that shows up in these novels.
Society and construction, especially within the wizarding world. Initially, it's kind of all fluff, and initially you get like social order and constructs where like Muggles, all these pure-blood wizards feel like they're superior to their non-magical or maybe like half-blood counterparts.
Okay, so you've just used a whole bunch of terms.
Okay.
So what do you mean when you say that the wizarding world, or made wizards, think that they're superior to Muggles?
Classes.
Okay, it's classist, if you want. But we don't really use that kind of term very much today, right?
Racist.
Yeah. How about racism? And what usually goes along with racism? Discrimination. And please note, by the way, discrimination and the verb form to discriminate are good words. What do they mean? To tell the difference between two things. That's discrimination. That means you have a discriminating mind. Okay? That's the real meaning. However, we're not talking about that kind of meaning, are we? Because we're not talking about this is different than this. We're saying this is better than this. How? How is this better than this?
Just bigotry.
Okay, but proverbial apples and oranges? Is this better than this for making a phone call? No. Is this better than this for slaking thirst? No. Okay? Even though you can do the little beer app that shows, you turn that and the beer, it doesn't really work. Okay? What else? How about prejudice? Prejudice isn't the same as racism, is it? Okay? So right there, you've got three little issues. Are these little issues in our society today? No, these are big issues. Okay? What else, though? Think of that quote, just one second, I'll call on each of you. Think of that quote that I said from the end of the first Harry Potter novel. There is no such thing as good and evil. There is only power, and those too weak to seek it. Now, that's not said by somebody we are supposed to emulate. So if it's not said by somebody we are supposed to emulate, are we supposed to accept that idea? No. So if we're not supposed to accept that idea, what is the opposite of that idea? There is good and evil. And what? Is there only power in those too weak to seek it? Well, there is power, and maybe those who are strong don't seek it. Okay? So what Rowling does here is she kind of turns some ideas on their heads. Now, when I said what else, 2 or 3 of you raised your hands. You did. Oppression.
Subtle heroism.
Say that again.
Subtle heroism.
Subtle
Or
heroism.
heroism without glory. So like Severus Snape as an example, being behind
Yep.
the scenes, or then
Yep.
Sam.
Sam.
As an example.
Okay. If you've never heard this before, I'll spit it out right now. Sam's the hero of Lord of the Rings. It's not Frodo. Frodo's a complete, total, utter failure. He gets to the cracks of doom, and what does he say? I will not do the thing I came to do. The ring is mine. You know, precious.
There's various forms of abuse that are addressed. Yeah.
Especially in the Harry Potter novels.
Well, there's a lot with Denethor and such.
Yeah, Denethor too, especially towards Faramir. But abusive families? How about broken families? I mean, one of the great things, I think, and I get chills whenever I think of this, one of the great things about the Harry Potter novels, and I think this is because Rowling experienced this to an extent, broken families. I mean, the scene with Harry getting ready to go off to the Forbidden Forest for the last time in Book 7. And he thinks about what he calls, man, I've got chill bumps all over. He thinks about the lost boys. Who are the lost children? Him? Snape? Who else? It's not one he's thinking of. Who truly found a home at Hogwarts? Tom Riddle. Harry, Severus, Tom Riddle. They found a home where they didn't have homes before. Okay? I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. Okay? So, we've got all this going on. What do we not have? And I'm going to step on toes here. What do we not hear referred to? And I'll bet if J.K. Rowling were to rewrite these today, she would bring in some of this terminology. Because in my opinion, she's gone off the wildly progressive deep end. I mean, she's just jumped into the deep end. What term do you often hear bandied about on college campuses today?
Freedom of speech,
You're getting close?
equality.
Well, yeah, don't even get me going on diversity. Diversity. Buzzword of the day. No, microaggression. What's a microaggression? Oh, I didn't call you by your right name. I didn't call you by the right pronoun. I didn't acknowledge you. Can be a microaggression. I asked where you're from. Literally. University of California system. You can get in trouble for asking somebody where they're from because you're implying something about their heritage. What planet do we live on, folks? Okay? Here's where the rant kind of begins. There won't be any microaggressions in here. Okay? I will macroaggress you. As Hamlet might say, I will so make offense in art as to be studied. In other words, what should this place be? Not just this classroom, but this entire campus. Should it be a, dare I, what the hell? Should it be a safe space?
The world's not a safe space.
Thank you. No, because the world's not a safe space. Yeah, but we're supposed to prepare you for the world. You're not supposed to really be in the world right now. Yeah, bullshit. And again, I'm not editing. This is all going up, okay? So what's meant by safe space in college campuses? I mean, you've had, in the last 3 years, university presidents affirm, including ours, affirm the university should be a safe space. What's meant by that? Is it meant you should be free from rape? Yes, of course you should be free from rape. Is that only on university campuses? No. In that sense, every place should be a safe space. That is a given of life. Okay? So what's meant by this? As it's usually used in elite universities. University of Missouri, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Rutgers, all the Ivy League schools. A place where you won't be offended. Okay. If that's what you want, leave now. I'm deadly serious. Because you will be offended in this classroom. I will puncture balloons. I will attack things. Okay? Whatever your politics are, I will probably piss you off. Even if you agree with my politics. Okay? I used to just kind of describe myself as pretty far-right conservative. I've gone beyond far-right conservative to libertarian to Genghis Khan. You know? And yet at the same time, if I were to fill out one of those stupid little, what do you believe kind of surveys, it would say at certain points, I am a liberal progressive Democrat. Okay? So, whether you're for or against Trump, you're not going to like me. Whether you're for or against whoever's going to be nominated in 2020 on the Democratic side, Kamala Harris, I don't know if crazy old Bernie's going to, keep taking drugs to keep going. And by the way, if I had been a liberal Democrat, Bernie's the one who I would have supported, because at least he was honest and believed what he said. Unlike Hillary Clinton, which I won't go. So, everything is open. Everything is up for discussion in here. Okay? If you're offended, grow some thicker skin. And that's a little rule, I would say, applies beyond here as well. This is a problem with our society today. People are too thin-skinned. They're too, it's all about me. No, it isn't. Life isn't all about you or me. And one of the things you're going to see from reading these novels, I think, and my other fantasy lit course, this comes out even more, it's really all about the other person. All of these novels are ultimately about serving somebody else. I said, who's the hero of Lord of the Rings? Sam. Why? Okay. Why else? He doesn't do anything for himself. What about Harry? When does Harry act entirely on his own behalf? He does a couple times. And when yes? Yep. And when he does act entirely on his own behalf, what tends to happen?
Bad stuff.
He screws up. And when he focuses entirely on himself, he tends to feel angry and sullen and emotional. I mean, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. He just needs to be taken out and beat. I don't care whether Dudley does it or Vernon does it or Hermione does it. He needs to be taken out and beat because he's being a whiny, petulant little brat. I would have 2 words for him. Grow up. Okay? Which he does do by the end of that novel. Or he starts to do. Okay? Because the way that novel ends, and this is why that novel becomes so important, is he's thinking only about himself and his loss. The one person who, seemingly, he's really cared about, who dies. And there's this really poignant scene where he's thinking about this person and he meets somebody else, and this other person has had her things stolen. And he turns from thinking only about himself to thinking about her, and he starts to feel better. Now, she also says some things that makes him start to feel better. And this is where, people who say J.K. Rowling's an atheist, or there is no quote-unquote God, or there is no religion in the Harry Potter stories have not read the same stories I've read. Because she brings up in that particular moment the whole issue of faith. Not faith in Jesus or Buddha or Allah or anything like that. Just faith, belief. Okay? All right, so lots of ideas are going to be discussed. If you're uncomfortable with them, too bad. Or leave now, because I'm giving you plenty of ample warning. What else do I want to say along those lines? Any questions at this point before we go on? Yes?
Do you know the quizzes, are they going to be mainly conceptual, or are they going to have, like, names and stuff?
They'll be primarily overplot. Who does what? Who does what to whom, where, when, why, and or how. Which I know with Lord of the Rings, you've got an awful lot of names. Okay. They'll be over major characters. Okay. More major events in the stuff we read. So, for example, let's assume you had a quiz on Thursday, and it was over. I know this sounds utterly absurd, but this is how much you have to read. It's over the first half of Fellowship of the Ring. Okay? I would say it would be a pretty good idea to know who is in the Fellowship of the Ring. Not the book, but the actual fellowship. Okay? Actually, take that back. You can't answer that because that doesn't come to the beginning of the second part of the book. Who is with Frodo as he journeys to Rivendell, as an example? Okay, what are some of the difficulties they run into? Who do they meet? What's the inn they stay at in Bree? Where is the town where the inn is at? I just named it. Who rescues them from the Barrow Wight? That kind of stuff. Major kind of plot things. Not, what does Frodo find on page 235? And probably what I'll do is maybe I'll do, like, if I have a quiz on Thursday, maybe it'll be like a dry run, a practice quiz, so it won't count. Unless you do really well, in which case maybe I'll let that count for you. Probably I'll drop one or two lowest quizzes. I won't do what some professors do and then also drop one or two of the highest quizzes because I just don't think that's fair. But I'll probably do something like that. Okay, so Fellowship of the Ring, in the 10 or so minutes we have left. Let me back up a little bit. How did Tolkien come to write these? Anybody know?
Didn't he start working with the Silmarillion and the Hobbit?
Yes. Silmarillion first actually began in around 1915, where he'd been reading Old English poetry, and he read one of what's called the Advent lyrics, which has a line, or half line, Eala Arundel, which means, lo, the morning star. Okay? And Tolkien took that, he was inspired by this, and he wrote a little poem. And he turned Arundel into a person. Okay? That's the beginning of the saga of Middle-earth, which takes 12 volumes, if you were to actually read all the notes and everything that go with it. So he starts writing these poems and short stories and things, dictionaries of gnomic language and dwarvish languages and such. He's writing on it while he's fighting in the trenches in World War I. And he comes back from the war, becomes professor of English after a while or Anglo-Saxon at Oxford. And the summer of, I believe it is 1931, he's sitting in his study, which is over his garage. He's got the window open, and he's marking entrance exams for Oxford, blue books. And he reads his student's paper. He turns the page, there's a blank page. He turns it, and on that page he writes, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." He had no idea what a hobbit was. And he puts the paper aside and goes on to the next one. And he comes back to it and starts to think about that. Where did that come from? What does that mean? And so he starts to create a story, which initially he tells to his children. I mean, he's writing it, but he's telling it to his children. Then he starts reading it to this group of other writers and quote-unquote intellectuals that he meets regularly with twice a week, a group called the Inklings. C.S. Lewis is one of them. And they suggest, hey, you ought to get this published. You ought to see about publishing it. He's already, by the time he publishes it, he is a world-renowned scholar of Old English and Beowulf. 1936, he delivers a lecture to the British Academy called Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics. Everybody after that point, if they write anything about Beowulf, they have to mention Tolkien. Because he's the first person to look at Beowulf literally as a work of literary art. What people prior to Tolkien did is they read Beowulf for what it told them about ancient pagan Germanic society. They kind of read it like it was a mine that you would dig in to get stuff out of. Tolkien read it just for the sheer joy and pleasure of reading it and experiencing it. Okay? So he finishes The Hobbit, has it typed up, and he sends it off to a publisher in London, a guy named Stanley Unwin. Unwin gets it, and its title is The Hobbit, or There and Back Again. He's like, what the hell? What is a Hobbit? So he takes the typescript. He doesn't want to read it. He gives it to his 10-year-old son, Rainer Unwin. He says, "Son, I want you to read this and tell me what you think of it." His 10-year-old son reads it, writes up, I think it is, or types up, about a 2-page response, and says, "This will become an instant classic. It will be read and enjoyed by child and adult alike." And his father, on the basis of that opinion alone, agrees to publish it. I think it's 1,500 copies. So it's not a very large print run. It's a very small print run. But he agrees to publish it. It sells out. Prints more, sells out. Prints more, sells out. Okay? And within a few months, it's a bestseller. It becomes, as Rainer Unwin said, an instant classic. Okay, now, that's an oxymoron. Because a classic means it stands the test of time. So how can it be an instant stands the test of time? Because his son realized, kind of like Dorothy says to Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is a different kind of book. All right? So, Tolkien publishes that. A couple years later, he gets invited to deliver a lecture at St. Andrews University in Scotland. He gets invited because of the publication of The Hobbit. And the lecture is titled On Fairy Stories. Okay? And what he's doing in this essay on fairy stories is he's trying to justify why adults need to read fairy stories, not children. What does a 5-year-old naturally tend to do? Or how does a child, a 5-year-old, naturally tend to think? What kind of characteristic is peculiar to children, 5-year-old, that is not to a 25-year-old?
Innocence.
Innocence. And what usually goes along with innocence?
Ignorance.
Nope. Curiosity, magic, wonder. Go for a walk with a 5-year-old, and they're going to spot all kinds of stuff on the ground that you're going to think is trash, garbage, junk. For them, no. That bottle cap isn't just a bottle cap. That rock isn't just a rock. It becomes something other, something magical. Okay? So Tolkien said, why waste a fairy story on a 5-year-old? 5-year-olds already have make-believe friends, right? You know many adults who have make-believe friends?
They're an institution.
Yeah, usually if they do, you might just want to kind of give them, a couple of feet extra space. No, so Tolkien says, if fairy stories are worthy to be written, they're worthy to be read by adults. Why? Because they offer adults 4 things. Fantasy, escape, recovery, consolation. Fantasy. He says fairy stories offer us fantasy. Why do we need fantasy?
Because life can suck sometimes.
Because life can suck sometimes. I like the qualifiers. Can, it may, sometimes. But for a lot of people, life sucks all the time. Imagine being in Houston today, or yesterday, or tomorrow, or for the next month for that matter. It's going to suck. Yeah, somebody might rescue you, but it's still going to suck. Why? Because your house, more than likely, is going to be under 8 feet of water for the next month. Okay? So what's fantasy? Not porn. I once had a student, teaching a class like this, and they were doing journals, and she went on, and mine's always female students, this is weird. She went on and on about her sexual fantasies with her boyfriend, and I'm like, no, don't need to know.
This is something we don't have in this world, like dragons.
Like dragons. And that's what Tolkien talks about. He says, as a child, I wanted dragons. I didn't want them in the backyard, but I wanted a world where dragons are real. Here's an example. I grew up in California. Okay? Earthquakes are fairly common. I don't mind earthquakes. I've been in some pretty big ones, 6.4, where pool out back, the water would be sloshing over the sides. Swords hanging in my dad's den would be swinging. I suddenly feel like I'm going to throw up, and it's not because I was ill. It's because I felt like I was on a boat, because the house was doing this. Okay? But I'd never experienced tornadoes. Moved to Tennessee. Always thought it'd be cool, to see a tornado. 2010, or was it 9, comes, where Murfreesboro had a few tornadoes. We had the big one, the Good Friday tornado, but we had one a week before that, an F0. It just happened. I was attending at the time. Our church was over off West McKnight in a little kind of like storefront thing. It just happened that F0 went right over the building we were meeting in. Took off part of the roof when we were meeting for Saturday night vespers. Looked out in the garage, all the windows blown out in my van, all my tires blown out. Because tornadoes can do that, okay? Didn't see it though. Experienced it, didn't see it. The next week, or 2 weeks later, I'm getting ready to go to a doctor's appointment or something, getting ready to turn off my street onto Highway 96, and all these cars are pulling over to the right. I'm like, what's going on? I turn and look to the right, and there, less than a quarter mile away, is a big, giant black V headed right towards me. And I'm like, shit. Jam my car in reverse, back up 200 yards to my house, tell my kids to get under the stairs, and being the damn fool I am, I go out on the front porch because I want to watch it. And I watch it, it just lifts up a little bit, doesn't touch the ground, hits the house at the end of the street, pops up a little bit, and then it drops down into the Blackman neighborhood. I'm just on the outer kind of edge of the Blackman neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, cross that off the bucket list. I don't need to see a tornado. Okay? Used to really want to see an alien. I'm pretty sure I don't need to see that anymore. So, fantasy. Why? To enliven our lives, to make our life seem richer, something to get us out of the doldrums. Escape. It's related to that. Now, a lot of people you'll talk to when they find out you're taking this class, you'll hear some of my colleagues say, "Oh, it's just pure escapism." You think somebody in Houston today could maybe do with a little escapism? You think somebody in prison, wrongfully, could do with a little escapism? You think somebody whose life absolutely sucks wouldn't like to escape? And Tolkien discusses the difference between the flight of the deserter and the escape of the prisoner. Okay? Notice, what is a deserter in the military? Bo Bergdahl. What did he do when he was in Afghanistan?
Ran.
He left his post. He left his post. Okay? The deserter is someone who flees from his or her responsibilities. They don't want to do it. What about the flight of the prisoner? And I think Tolkien is thinking like prisoner of war. What is a prisoner of war's job to do?
Escape.
To attempt to escape. Okay? Why? Because they don't belong there. I think the film was titled Instinct. Anthony Hopkins, Cuba Gooding Jr. Anthony Hopkins is an anthropologist. Cuba Gooding Jr. is a lawyer. Anthony Hopkins gets arrested because he killed some guys who were poaching mountain gorillas. Okay? He gets arrested, thrown into prison in South Florida, and Cuba Gooding Jr. Actually isn't his lawyer. I think he's his psychologist. They have to determine whether or not he's sane so he can stand trial for murder. Okay? And there's this wonderful scene with Anthony Hopkins in his cell, and he's painted the walls of the cell like the jungles of Africa. His way of saying, yeah, you can lock me up, but up here, I've escaped. Totally free. Okay? Tolkien says, fairy stories provide escape for us. They provide varieties of kinds of escape. Escape for daily mundane stuff, and also what he calls the great escape. If there was one thing people could escape from, one thing, what one thing would they most want to escape from? Close.
Death.
Death. Death. Think about it. Why do plastic surgeons exist? For the most part, I'm not saying there aren't logical and good reasons for plastic surgery. You know, if you're a woman and you've had a mastectomy, yes. But if you're simply 80 years old and your face shows the ravages of age, what are you doing when you get all those wrinkles removed?
Escaping the ravages of time.
Yeah, you're trying to escape age. You're trying to deny death. Voldemort, fly from death. Tolkien says death is the one escape we would really like to flee from, which is why there are so many tales of immortality. Okay? Recovery. I know I've only got a minute. Recovery. Tolkien talks about this and says, fairy stories can provide us this. What is it? It's regaining of a clear view. Seeing, he says, as we were meant to see. Because right now, every one of us, Tolkien would argue, is wearing a set of glasses. And the glasses are dingy and dirty. And we need to learn to see properly. And what he ultimately means by that is we need to learn to see things and people as distinct from ourselves. What's he mean? Separate. Not tied to us. I'm not wearing it because my fingers are swollen. But he means like seeing my wife not as my wife, but as I saw her 33 years ago when I first met her. I was like, wow. Because after 32 years, you know, it's kind of like, oh, great, you know, waking up next to the same person over. He calls that the drab triteness of familiarity. Okay? It's, you know, it's that internet meme. You know, say you love, I love you to someone you love because you don't know today might be their last day. Or it might be your last day. I mean, you never know. MTSU could become Virginia Tech. There could be some wacko roaming around the halls out here just looking for somebody to kill. It happens on a college campus every year. Right? So, use the time you have. Lastly, consolation. We'll talk about that on Thursday. Okay, that is all. So, try to read like the first half of Fellowship of the Ring.